The day everything snapped for me, I was sitting in a beat-up sedan outside a coffee shop with an eviction notice shaking in my hands, and I remember thinking, this is it, this is rock bottom. 20 days to get out. 20 days to find somewhere for me and my 4-year-old son Mason when my checking account was already screaming, and somehow I was more worried about how I was going to pick him up from daycare and still smile like nothing was wrong. I actually talked to myself in that car because sometimes that's the only voice you get, like 5 minutes. Jenna, you get 5 minutes to fall apart. Then you wipe your face, go buy the cheapest coffee in there, and pretend you're not one overdue bill away from losing everything. Inside Maple Street Coffee, it smelled like cinnamon and espresso, and people who did not have eviction notices in their purses, you know what I mean. Laptops and clean coats everywhere, while I'm counting coins and praying the barista doesn't say the total out loud. I ordered the smallest coffee, paid an exact change, found a seat by the window, and I was just shoving that notice deep in my bag, like I could bury the problem, when I heard this tiny voice next to me say, "My shoe won't stay." I looked down and saw her, a little girl with messy blonde curls and serious gray eyes, one sneaker half off laces, dragging, trying so hard to tie them that my mom brain kicked in before my pride could say, "Hey, stay in your lane." I slid off my chair, got down on one knee and said, "Come here, sweetheart," while my fingers did that automatic loop and pull they've done 1,000 times for Mason. "Their double knot, that one isn't going anywhere." She giggled and said, "Thank you, my dad usually does it, but his hands are shaking today." And that is when I looked up and saw him. Dark blue suit that probably cost more than my car, black hair, with a little gray at the temples. Jaw clenched, cup trembling just enough to give him away, the kind of face you see on a billboard, for a bank not staring at a woman in a flour-dusted bakery uniform. "Lily, don't bother the lady," he said, stepping closer, voice low and smooth. "She's not bothering me," I told him as I stood and brushed at my jeans, suddenly very aware of every wrinkle. "She's a sweetheart." He gave me this small, almost shy smile and held out his hand. "I'm Daniel Hart." "Jenna," I said, slipping my hand into his, and I noticed how warm and steady his grip was, not that competitive squeeze some guys in suits use like they're trying to prove something. When he went to pay for Lily's cookie, his wallet slipped, hit the floor, and I bent down, picked it up, handed it back, and asked, because my filter was clearly broken that day. "Rough one." He let out a breath like he'd been holding it all morning and said, "Board meeting that wouldn't end, nanny quit, 12 phone calls on the drive over. Everybody wanting something, nobody actually seeing me." Then he caught himself and added, "Sorry, oversharing, thank you for helping her." "I get it." I shrugged. I just worked 10 hours at a bakery where a woman almost started a riot because her frosting swirl leaned left. Everybody is stressed about something. He looked at me, then really looked like he was taking in the tired under my eyes and the flower on my sleeve. "You just fixed the one thing in front of you," he said quietly. I can't remember the last time my life felt that simple. I laughed and said, "If I could fix everything important with a double knot, trust me, I would." And in that moment, with my eviction notice hiding in my purse, he said the sentence that rerouted my whole life. "I don't have a wife," he blurted out, like it surprised him too. "Can I have a date with you?" The room went muffled, and I remember blinking at him and saying, "I'm sorry, what?" Because there was no universe where the guy in the $1,000 suit was asking out the girl in the stained apron. "I know you don't know me," he said, cheeks going a little pink, "and I know this is not how normal people do this, but I spent all day with people who want my money, my name, my signature, and then I watched you help my kid without thinking. No angle, no performance, just kindness. I haven't felt this pulled towards someone since before my wife died. So yeah, I don't have a wife, can I take you out sometime?" Old me, the version held together with duct tape and pride since Mason's dad walked out, wanted to shut it down with a joke, but something in his face made me test him instead. I have a son. I said, Mason, he's 4. His eyes softened, not that fake soft people pull out when they hear single mom, but real, like he recognized the weight sitting on my shoulders. I'd like to meet him one day, he said. I'm broke, I added, because if he wanted the truth, he could have all of it, like eviction notice in my bag broke. He didn't flinch. I have more money than I'll ever reasonably spend, he said, voice low. It hasn't fixed a single thing that actually hurt. Being useful does. Connecting with people does. I don't want to rescue you, Jenna. I want to know you. One date. Let me prove I'm not another man who runs when things get real. When you are sitting in the middle of your own disaster, and somebody looks at you like you are not a problem to be solved, but a person worth seeing, it does something to you, so I gave him my number, fully expecting him to lose it or come to his senses. Instead, he called at 7 on the dot that night. We talked for hours, like two people who had been holding their breath for years about his startup years, in a tiny shared office with a flickering light, about sleeping on the couch. There because he couldn't afford both rent and an assistant. About his wife Elena going from a headache to a terminal diagnosis in 6 months, about long hospital hallways and coming home to a house that still smelled like her shampoo. I told him about Mason's dad, Ryan, walking out when I was 6 months pregnant because he wasn't ready to be a father, about working 2 jobs with a baby who woke up every 2 hours, about crying in the walk-in freezer so no one would see. Somewhere in there he asked, if money wasn't a problem, what would you do? And the answer slid out before I could swallow it. I'd open my own bakery, big windows, warm light bread you can smell from down the block. I'd call it morning light, because that is the only time of day I still like. There was a little silence on the line, and he said, what if that didn't have to stay a someday thing? And I laughed because, yeah, right. Like that happens to people like me, but he didn't laugh with me. A week later, he picked me up for our first official date. No limo, no show, just a black SUV that looked out of place in front of my crumbling building, and him in jeans and a button-down, like he was trying to meet my life where it actually was. He took me to this small Italian place with checkered tablecloths and garlic in the air, and we talked about kids and grief and stupid corporate buzzwords until my shoulders forgot to stay tense. Halfway through dessert, he wiped his hands on his napkin and said, there is something I want to offer you, and I need you to let me finish before you tell me I'm insane. Yeah, that happened. I own a few properties, he said. One of them is a small house in a decent neighborhood, 3 bedrooms, little yard, good schools. It's been sitting empty for months, and I want you and Mason to live there. I put my fork down so fast it rattled. Absolutely not. I said, maybe louder than I meant. I am not moving into your spare house like some charity project you can brag about in meetings. He didn't flinch, he just nodded like he expected that. I'm not trying to own you, he said. You pay the utilities, take care of the place when you're more stable. We talk about rent or buying or whatever you want. I just have something that could change your life sitting there collecting dust, and it makes me feel useless. Let me use what I have for something that matters. I don't want to owe you, I told him, and my voice shook because that was the part that scared me more than anything. You already don't, he said softer. You tied my kid's shoe and somehow tied a knot in my chest that hasn't let go since. This is me trying to live with that. Let me help. Let me show you I'm staying. If it had just been me, I probably would have walked away, gone back to my leaky ceiling and my stubborn independence. But when you have a child, your pride has to stand behind their safety in line. So a month later, I was standing in the yard of a little blue house watching Mason climb a crooked swing set, while movers carried in our thrift store furniture. And for the first time in years, I slept without a bucket under a leak. A few days after the move, he showed up in my new kitchen with another folder, this one full of photos of a corner space downtown with big windows and a tired for-lease sign. "Morning Light Bakery," he said, tapping the picture. "You named it, I found it. I put in the capital, you run it. We split profits in your favor. You hire your own people, you design the menu, you call the shots. I just get to say I invested in something that actually makes people happy instead of another app." I paced that kitchen for nights staring at those plans while Mason snored down the hall, arguing with every voice in my head that said girls like me don't get storefronts with their names on them. And then one morning I called him and said, "Fine, let's do it. But if this blows up, I get to say I told you so." The months that followed were brutal and beautiful. Paint on my hands, flour in my hair, mornings that started at 4 a.m. Daniel showing up at dawn with coffee, and Lily me teaching a tiny team how to make my recipes right. On opening day, there was a line out the door, part neighborhood, curiosity, part whatever magic his marketing people had done, and by closing time I was exhausted, sticky with sugar, and happier than I'd been in years. Somewhere in that blur between school pickups and late-night inventory, we stopped pretending we were just partners. One night after both kids passed out on a pile of blankets in my living room, movie credits rolling and dishes still in the sink, he looked at me and said, "I love you, Jenna. I don't want to keep acting like this is casual. I wake up excited to see your name on my phone, and I go to bed grateful you said yes in that coffee shop. Be my girlfriend for real." I was tired, covered in flour and stress, and somehow that made it easier to tell the truth. "I love you too," I said, "and I'm not built for casual anyway." And just like that, my life shifted again, this time into something that finally felt like it fit. For a while, it really did feel like a dream, two houses slowly becoming one life, kids moving between them like it was the most natural thing in the world. Morning light, paying its own bills, me starting to breathe without waiting for the next disaster. But the higher you climb out of the hole, the more visible you get to the people who like kicking ladders. Daniel's company sponsored a big charity gala downtown, chandeliers, black tie, the whole thing, and he wanted me there on his arm. I showed up in a dress a friend helped me find, still half in shock that it actually zipped, and at first it was awkward, small talk, and "I've heard of your bakery." Then this man walked up, older, colder, perfect suit, perfect hair, smile that never reached his eyes, and Daniel introduced him as Victor Kane, a rival billionaire, the kind of guy you can tell is used to owning every room he walks into. Victor looked me up and down like I was a budget option on a menu and said, "So this is the famous baker, quite the upgrade, Miss Cole, from bagging bread to black tie. Must be nice having Daniel smoothing the way." "I'm his partner," I said. "I own Morning Light." He smirked, took a sip of his drink, and said, "Of course, and I'm sure it's pure coincidence that your little shop exploded right after you started dating him. Tell me, how does it feel knowing people assume you're with him for what he can give you?" Daniel stepped in, ready to shut it down, but I put a hand on his arm because I was so tired of letting men with money write my story. "People can assume whatever helps them sleep," I told Victor, keeping my voice even. "I know why I'm with him, he knows why he's with me. I bake, he invests, we both love our kids. If that looks like gold digging to you, maybe you need to look at your own relationships." His eyes went sharp for a second, before he smiled that thin smile and wandered off. 3 weeks later, we had a surprise health inspection. Then anonymous, one-star reviews started popping up, fake accounts claiming bugs in pastries and stolen recipes. Whispers online that Morning Light only existed because I was sleeping with my investor. And for the first time since opening, I watched our numbers dip and felt that old panic claw up my throat. Daniel's lawyer traced the fake accounts back to a PR firm on Victor's payroll, found emails telling people to raise questions about my shop, and suddenly it wasn't just a feeling that someone was trying to drag me back down, it was right there in black and white. We could have let the lawyers handle it quietly, but there is a point where you get tired of crying in back rooms. So we walked into his glass office with a folder full of receipts, and I set it on his desk with hands that would not stop shaking. He flipped through a few pages, leaned back in his leather chair, and said, "Even if I had anything to do with whatever you think is happening, which I'm not admitting, what's your plan? Drag this into court and let the world watch the single mom accuse the big bad billionaire. You really want that show?" I was scared, yeah, but I was also angry in a way that made my voice steady. "Here's my plan," I said. "You stop all of it, every fake review, every whisper campaign. You put out a statement saying any rumors about Morning Light were unfounded, and you donate $50,000 to a culinary scholarship fund in my name so some kid like me gets a shot at school. Or we file this, and every petty email you signed turns into public record, and you get to explain to your board why a woman with a rolling pin scared you enough to break the law." He stared at me for a long time, then looked at Daniel like he was hoping for a softer deal. But Daniel just said, "Your call," and eventually Victor said, "Fine," in a tone that told me this was not over in his head, even if it was on paper. The statement went out, the donation hit the local news, and the twist I didn't see coming was how many people showed up for us. Customers came in on purpose, bought extra, told me they wanted to support the bakery that stood up for itself. Other small business owners pulled me aside and said, "We wish we'd done what you did when someone came after us." Morning Light got busier, not quieter. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was actually standing my ground. Not long after that, on a beach day with the kids with Lily and Mason building a lopsided sandcastle, while a lifeguard kept an eye on them, Daniel took my hands and said, "A year ago, I walked up to a stranger in a coffee shop and asked for one date today. I'm asking for the rest. Will you marry me? Will you let me be Mason's dad in every way that matters? Will you keep building this life with me on purpose?" And I said yes with sand in my shoes and sunscreen in my hair, because by then he'd already done the hard part of that promise. We had a backyard wedding with string lights and cupcakes from my own ovens. His adoption of Mason became legal. A little while later, Morning Light opened more locations, that scholarship fund. With my name on it, started sending kids to culinary school. And one day, I looked up from the counter and realized I had become the person I used to daydream about when I wiped tables in somebody else's shop. And still, every time our story lands in the comments under some article or video, the same lines show up. "She got lucky. She used him. If a billionaire offered me a house, I'd say yes too. Gold digger with an apron." So I'll leave you with the question I still turn over in my head when the house is quiet and the kids are asleep. When a broke single mom says yes to help from a man who actually shows up, who signs the papers and carries the boxes and stands next to her when powerful people come after her, is she selling her soul, or is she finally refusing to drown alone? If you were in that car with an eviction notice in your hands and a chance at a different life in front of you, would you have said no to the date, the house, the bakery, the man, just to keep strangers comfortable with their idea of earning it? Or would you have taken the risk and dealt with the judgment? Later, tell me in the comments which part of this story feels right to you, which part makes you angry, what you've lived or seen yourself hit, like if you'd still eat at Morning Light. After everything you've heard, subscribe. If you want more stories from this side of the counter, and share this with someone who swears that accepting help automatically makes you the villain.